And welcome to Law&Crime Report, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. We're going to start with Chad Wheeler. Really incredible story here about the former offensive tackle for the Seattle Seahawks. He has pleaded not guilty to criminal charges related to allegedly attacking his girlfriend. The reports are that he suffered a manic episode when he allegedly choked her into unconsciousness. Now, he faces charges of first-degree domestic violence assault, unlawful imprisonment, and resisting arrest. And I want to get right into it. Joining me right now is criminal defense attorney Gabriela Teresa Gonzalez. Gigi, I'm happy to have you here to talk about these cases. And really, what a way to start here, because he's pled not guilty to these charges, yet he's issued an apology. And just to give a sample of what he said, "I'm deeply sorry for the pain and suffering that I've caused to the woman and her family. I apologize profusely for the turmoil that I've caused." And he goes on to say that the most important thing right now is that she gets the care that she needs and I get help. Both are happening. So he pleads not guilty, but then issues this apology. Doesn't that hurt his cases of saying he's innocent?
Yeah, certainly. And it almost reads like a confession or at least some sort of acceptance of responsibility where he's saying sorry to the victim and that he apologizes for the suffering he caused the victim. It will definitely hurt his case. However, if he really was suffering a manic episode, which is possible, this is a football player who's probably suffered some very serious head trauma and brain trauma, then maybe just maybe he will have a pretty good position to ask the state for leniency in sentencing and recommend that he get treatment for these manic episodes.
Okay, well, let's get into that. You said it might be a way to help with sentencing, but is it a way to excuse his conduct? If we're talking about a manic episode legally, what does that mean? Does that mean that he wasn't in control of his facilities? He couldn't control himself, and therefore he's not guilty? Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, potentially, right? He wasn't responsible because this mental defect did not allow him to appreciate the nature of his crimes, or that he was not able to understand what he was doing at the time of the crime. If they're able to put forward some sort of medical records and experts that say that he was experiencing a manic episode at the time where he could not appreciate his actions, then maybe his actions will be defensible here.
And doesn't that help in the sense that he's charged, with resisting arrest? If you're resisting officers, you could almost argue, right? I didn't know what I was doing. Well, I would never just, try to resist officers in this state. I was out of my mind. Doesn't that help his case, as opposed to when we talk about these mental defects, if somebody's trying to avoid the police or they know that what they did is wrong, and we always see these times where people commit crimes and then they just wait and they don't realize what they did, and the police come and they're surprised that that happened. So I'm curious, the resisting arrest part, could that ultimately help him here?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because the conduct is consistent throughout the entire incident. This person is suffering a mental episode that is causing a manic episode, and he starts wailing on his girlfriend. And then when cops come to intervene, he starts wailing on them. And it isn't until sometime after that he realizes what happened and what transpired during this manic episode. So I think the fact that that is all stemming from the same incident, all of the violence from the same manic episode, that does help his defense in this case.
Now, Gigi, this woman suffered some significant injuries: a fractured humerus, dislocated elbow, apparently was vomiting large amounts of blood. She had thought she died. Could his charges be upgraded to attempted murder?
Potentially. And, in Washington State, I was looking up the assault penalties for the types of charges that he is being charged with. And they're very serious. At this point, with domestic violence assault, if I'm correct, he's facing up to 20 years in prison if found guilty for this. So he is going to be facing some very serious prison time with these charges alone. And if she really was afraid for her life, and it could be upped to a potentially attempted murder charge.
And she appeared in court. She had her arm in a sling. There was a statement read on her behalf. What role does she, as this alleged victim, what role does she play in the legal process right now for Wheeler?
If I understand correctly, you're asking as far as Wheeler's case, how far it goes. Right now she's a victim.
I'm
So
asking
as
in
far
terms
as
of,
her,
she's going to play a pivotal role, right? I mean, she's the victim, but is she going to be a key witness? How would that work out? I mean, she really is the central focus of this entire case.
yeah, definitely. And unless there's no other witnesses in this case, she's going to have to take the stand and describe in detail what happened the day that Mr. Chad Wheeler beat her almost to death. Unless there's some sort of video evidence or some other evidence that the state could use in their case against him, she's going to have to cooperate with the state, and she may just have to take the stand.
Now, the NFL has said that they're going to review the league's personal conduct policy. Is there any role they play here? Do they have to do an investigation of their own, or is this just an isolated incident?
Well, we've seen in the past the NFL do their own investigations here, and they tend to penalize their players for violating their own code of conduct. We've seen NFL players that get kicked out of the league for smoking a J, and we've seen NFL players suspended for a couple of games for beating up their girlfriends in elevators. So the NFL will definitely be conducting some sort of investigation, and how they decide to deal with Chad Wheeler will be decided in the next couple of weeks. But if history has anything to do with their decision, then we could see him being suspended in future games.
Well, we're going to move from one case of potential abuse to another one because Marilyn Manson, and this story has gone absolutely viral. Multiple women, including actress Evan Rachel Wood, have publicly accused the rocker of physical and mental abuse, sexual assault, and intimidation. Now, Manson has denied these allegations, calling them horrible distortions of reality. There's been a lot of fallout over this, including the fact that his music label has parted ways with him. And the California State Senator Susan Rubio has written a letter to the Attorney General Monty Wilkinson and FBI Director Christopher Wray asking the DOJ to launch a probe. Let's start there, Gigi. Talk about what that could look like. Will the DOJ launch a probe here, and how could that play out?
Likely. These are very serious accusations, and he's got four women who are making consistent accusations against him. I think that, considering what we know with the Harvey Weinstein case and how that unraveled, I don't see this playing out in a dissimilar way. I do fully expect there to be an investigation into Marilyn Manson, Brian Warner's past with these women.
Well, if you were representing Marilyn Manson at this point, what would you advise him to do? What would you do? No criminal charges, allegations. That's where we are right now. What would you do if you were his lawyer?
Stay quiet. Don't talk to anybody about anything. He already released a statement, which it is what it is. You work with it, but otherwise, he should not be talking to any media. He should not be talking to anybody about this case, because the last thing that he needs are his own words being used against him in a potential trial if these accusations end up leading to charges.
Gigi, you had mentioned Harvey Weinstein. I thought the same thing. And the idea that that case, his case, is a lot of it. I mean, most of it was based on witness testimony. There wasn't a ton of physical evidence. If that's the same situation here, I mean, they're talking about a pattern, right? Evan Rachel Wood comes forward. Multiple other women came forward. Rose McGowan, who had, dated Marilyn Manson, came forward, said she wasn't abused, but she is horrified at these allegations. How does the government ultimately make a case and prove a case against Marilyn Manson if, in fact, there's not a ton of physical evidence? And a lot of this is vague, right? A lot of these allegations, we don't know all the specific details of what he's accused of, but it's pretty horrific. So what do they have to do to build a case against him?
Well, they're going to have to build it the same way they built the Harvey Weinstein case, which is with witness testimony. These four women will have to cooperate with the state, with the government, in creating this case. They're going to have to seek other witnesses that might have, witnessed the events that these women are accusing Marilyn Manson of. They're going to bring in character witnesses to testify to whether or not Marilyn Manson has a propensity to abuse women. If I was his defense attorney, though, Marilyn Manson's a weird guy. And what I would be arguing with is you kind of consented to some weird things by entering into a relationship with him. You knew he was weird. You knew he acted outside of conventional norms, and that likely he would be treating you outside of conventional norms. So it's going to be a very interesting case to play out here.
That's an interesting point you just made, right? That he appears, he's not a clean-cut guy, okay? And he's had quite the history, his music. And the question is, if this were to go to a jury, or even in the court of public opinion, people could look at him and judge him based on the way he looks, based upon his music, based upon what he's done in the past. And does that mean that he's not going to have the same kind of case as another person? That really the cards could be stacked against him because based upon everything, there's a perception of him. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I think the perception of him, the weird perception of him actually works in this case. Let's compare him to Harvey Weinstein, where Harvey Weinstein was this hotshot movie mogul who was cutting deals and showing up in suits. And he just looked like the type of guy that you wanted to party with and who had all the connections. Versus Marilyn Manson, you know him looking at him. The guy's a weird guy, right? He's got the makeup and the strange lyrics and this very out there persona, right? Where, you look at him and you might think you're going to get into some weird stuff if you're hanging out with him, right? His looks are not deceiving. So, I tend to lean towards his public perception helping him in this case.
Do you think that more women are going to come forward? Do you think there's going to be more accusations leveled against them in the days, the weeks to follow? Because this all hit. Again, you want to remember about Harvey Weinstein. When that New York Times piece hit, that was the start. And then this just happened. Evan Rachel Wood let the ball roll, and now it's just picking up steam. What are you expecting to happen as time goes on?
If there are more witnesses, if there are more victims in this case, then we are definitely going to be hearing them over the next couple of weeks. Why? Because it takes one victim to stand up and to stand out and say, hey, this is what was done to me. This person did it. If anybody has a similar story, reach out to me. And then that's where it goes. That one victim empowers another victim, which empowers more victims. And it becomes a snowball effect of more victims coming out. So if there are more victims, they are going to feel empowered by these 4 women coming out and making similar accusations against him, and they will feel compelled to stand up against him. So if there are, we're going to find out very soon.
And we'll pay attention to that. We'll pay attention to what happens with the DOJ if they ultimately launch a probe. We'll take a break, but when we come back, we want to focus on a story we've been following here on Law and Crime. There's an update in that 9-year-old girl who's seen on video getting pepper sprayed by police. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back, everybody. 3 Rochester police officers have now been suspended after body cam video circulated online of them appearing to pepper spray a 9-year-old girl. The officers had responded to an incident in which the girl was reportedly suicidal. And we're going to show you a portion of this video, but I warn you, this is disturbing.
You're not going to run away from me, okay? Because I'm going to have to chase you, okay? And I got like 6 other cars coming to chase you.
I don't care.
All right?
I don't care.
Well, come and talk to me, please.
No, I don't want to.
Let's go have a seat.
No, I want my dad.
You're not going to run off.
I want my dad.
Yes, you're going to be fine. Stop.
I want my dad. I'm not getting in no car until I see my dad.
Here, just stop for a second.
I want my dad.
Control 47, I'm in the...
I want my dad. No.
Stop. Don't kick us, dear.
Stop! Wait, can I just please get the snow off of me?
I'll get the snow off
It
you.
is cold.
Get in the car. You've had your chance.
Get in the car now,
Okay?
okay?
You've had your chances.
I want
What
my
are you
dad.
doing?
I want
What
my
are you
dad.
doing?
I want
Because
my
you're going to go to jail now, too.
You're up.
Stop!
Sit up.
No!
You're acting like a child.
I want to go.
Stop.
I am a child.
Matt, I'm gonna go get him. Now sit back. Matt, I will fix it. I will fix it.
If we need to, why don't we separate Mount Star?
Let's just sit back.
I want to see my dad.
Matt, please sit back.
Please don't, please.
Matt, put your legs in. It's your last chance.
Just prayer.
No, I have
Just
a dad
prayer at this
more.
point.
Stop!
Here.
Stop.
I got her. I got her. Yeah.
Please wipe my eye. Wipe my eye, please.
Unbelievable.
All right, that's really tough to watch, and it should be noted that the girl was taken to a hospital and then released. Joining us in the conversation is forensic investigator from Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, I'm happy to have you here, and I want to start with you because talk to us about the pepper spray. I mean, what effect does that have? I want us to all understand what that 9-year-old girl went through.
Yeah, good to be with you, Jesse. Wow. The last cop said unbelievable. Yeah, it is unbelievable. What in the hell are they thinking? This is a 9-year-old child. And one of the problems with pepper spray, when you use it to even subdue an adult, it creates a respiratory reaction. And many times it can cause edema. These sorts of things compromise your ability to breathe. And that's what they're wanting to do. They control you through this chemical application. And so it's going to disorient the individual. It's dependent upon what their health situation is like. It can compromise their ability to have adequate oxygen uptake. So this is striking in and of itself when you see that they've got a whole group of, adult police officers attempting to subdue this child who is obviously in distress. I mean, look, most of the time I'll fall in line with law enforcement methodologies. You're trying to get somebody under control, but I'm talking about a 9-year-old child, and this isn't the first time. There's been problems in Rochester. I have no idea what's going on up there, but this is something that really needs to be explored, Jesse.
Gigi, the officers were suspended. I'm curious your thoughts on that decision. The union president, Mike Mazzeo, seems to almost disagree and said that the officers had to subdue the girl. And he said, I'm not saying there are not better ways to do things, but let's be realistic about what we're facing. It's not TV. It's not Hollywood. We don't have a simple situation. What do you think about these officers being suspended and what could happen to them next?
Well, I think these cops are really lucky to have the support of the union behind them because, quite frankly, what we watched on that video was a disturbing, there's no justification of what they did to that child. And when that child said, I am a child, in the face of these officers who are treating her like some sort of violent adult criminal, it is very disturbing. And so often in the news, we watch Black and brown kids being treated like adults or perceived as an adult. And the way the police officers handled this call, you're showing up for a mental health call, and what you're doing is antagonizing this kid, threatening this kid with tremendous police intervention, 6 more cars coming after her if she doesn't cooperate, while this girl is scared and begging for her dad. I think these cops got lucky getting an administrative leave, and quite frankly, I would love to see charges brought against them for this heinous act.
And what charges would those be, Gigi?
I would love to see some sort of assault and battery on a minor. I would love to see some sort of kidnapping charge. I would like to see them really throw the book here and get creative with it, because there has to be a strong message sent to officers that you cannot pepper spray kids, especially not kids that are handcuffed in the back of your car.
Joseph, now the investigation is underway. They're going to look at what exactly happened here. We have some portions of that police body cam. What else do they need to look at here as they try to get a fuller understanding of that story?
Oh, well, what they need to look at is de-escalation. There's a force continuum that we follow that's on the books. I mean, it's standard SOP. Listen, you're dealing with a 9-year-old child. Wouldn't it seem reasonable that you just take the child aside? First off, you don't throw her into the back of the car and threaten to take her to jail. First off, I don't know if she fully comprehends that. Secondly, you wait until somebody can show up. You got all of these people that are surrounding her. You're telling me that you couldn't have removed her to another location, set her on the stoop, away from the car, kind of de-escalate the situation, calm things down. Bring somebody out that's equipped to deal with a 9-year-old child. Look for her dad. I don't know what harm is there in doing this. Why do you have to throw cuffs on her, throw in the back of a police car, and then spray her with a chemical? I don't understand it. It's beyond the pale. So in this investigation, the force continuum is going to be talked about. De-escalation and application of that is going to be talked about relative to the SOP. And I got to tell you, if I was the parents, I'd seek Gigi out. Is who I would seek out, and I would want her to go after these.
Well, I got to tell you, Gigi's on a lot of these, a lot of our shows, and I make some great points. I wouldn't be surprised if, there are a lot of people looking and trying to see Gigi's help in a lot of these cases. But, it is an interesting story. We're going to continue to follow it. And I want to switch gears to a different story. And it's a question of, are we going to continue to follow this one? Because this is about D.B. Cooper, a major suspect in the 1971 skyjacking of Northwest Orient Flight 305 has died at 94 years old. And we're talking about the man who called himself D.B. Cooper, ransomed passengers on that plane, and then skydived out of the plane with money. Now, the case remains unsolved, but Sheridan Peterson, who died this past week, was one of the most prominent suspects. And he once admitted to the FBI that they had good reason to suspect me. Joseph, I'll stick with you on this. Does his death now end the investigation? Because if he really was the person, does a lot of the answers and a lot of the evidence die with him? I mean, this is a big development. What do you think?
Yeah, it is a big development relative to this gentleman's passing. However, let's keep in mind, D.B. Cooper, much like Bigfoot, is cottage industry. And there are a lot of people that have stakes in this. I mean, I can't tell you how many books and how many documentaries have been made about this incident, and it's fantastical almost that someone could have survived a jump like that. When you trace it back, you see what kind of elements had to be in place. Remember, they stopped this plane. He had them land this plane, the infamous D.B. Cooper. We don't know who D.B. Cooper actually is, and had parachutes brought aboard, had the passengers disembark from the plane, and then you're going to do a jump, a kind of a low altitude jump into this heavily forested area. It's always been a wonder that anyone could survive. Remember, they did find particulate pieces of these monies that were given to him as a demand, and they've been found over the years in various creek beds and that sort of thing. So, look, D.B. Cooper's never going to go away. Never, ever.
Well, that's the question, Gigi. I mean, we're talking about something from 1971. This is a guy who made these very incriminating statements. He had a background and a skill set that would have been perfect. It perfectly set him up as D.B. Cooper, yet not arrested. And why is that?
He had a rock-solid alibi. He said that he was in Nepal at the time of this hijacking. And I have to assume that he was able to back that up with evidence and witnesses. Otherwise, the FBI would have slapped the cuffs on him because there's just too many coincidences. Sheridan and D.B. Cooper were expert parachutists. They both were 44 and white men at the time. And Sheridan took a lot of pleasure in kind of taunting the FBI. And I think for that reason, it's not him. Because I would like to think that Sheridan, if it was D.B. Cooper, he would have left a note to the FBI saying, hey, this was a good time. By the way, I was your guy. Peace out. Something like that. But we didn't get that as far as we know. So I think we're still waiting to find out who D.B. Cooper is.
I don't know. The good old I was in Nepal defense. I like that one. Joseph, we look at this, right? And it's an interesting story. It's been in the news for such a long time. But how important is it for investigators to ultimately solve this case? People are like, that was so long ago. No one was killed. I mean, how important is it for them to solve it?
Well, going back to Gigi's point, I think that this is kind of interesting. Just imagine if they had substantive information or investigative leads that they had developed relative to this gentleman. Is it possible that him, because can you imagine how many careers would have been made if they were able to to put the cuffs on him. I began to think about things like the Zodiac killer. There was a guy that came forward a few years ago and claimed that his dad was a Zodiac killer. But the San Francisco police never arrested anybody, or none of the authorities there. That's a career-making arrest. You can live the rest of your life just simply talking about that case. So if they had substantive information, I think they would have slapped the cuffs on him, and that would have been the end of the story, other than all the memoirs that would have been written.
Well, I don't think the discussion's going to end, but it is a new development in that case. And speaking of new developments, we're going to talk about a development when we come back in the case of the suspected Daytona Beach serial killer. We'll be right back. Talk about Robert Hayes, the suspected Daytona Beach serial killer who's facing murder charges for women, and he had his case continued, and he's going to be back in court in May. Now, we thought that he was going to have this Nelson hearing, but there were some technical issues. Really interesting case if you don't know a lot about it. Our very own Anjanette Levy has more on the story.
This is the 13-page handwritten motion that Robert Hayes has filed in his Palm Beach County case. In it, he claims that prosecutors withheld evidence that would help him defend himself.
Suspected serial killer Robert Hayes, in quarantine, appeared via Zoom in a Palm Beach County courtroom just briefly. He'd hoped to make his case, but there were technical issues.
Mr. Hayes, I thought in the past that the deputies had the ability to do something with the hardware out there to get you to activate the microphone, but that's not the case.
Hayes is accused of murdering Rachel Bay in 2016 by strangling her. Palm Beach County deputies say a rape kit revealed Hayes' DNA.
So we have Rachel Bay's DNA and Robert Hayes' DNA. It's more likely that the DNA sample is Rachel Bay and Robert Hayes than Rachel Bay and any other human on the planet.
Genetic genealogy solved Bay's murder and linked Hayes to the murders of 3 more women in Daytona Beach from 2005 to 2006. Those women had been shot to death.
Had we not done this, we're pretty sure that he would have killed again.
Hayes has pleaded not guilty, and in his motion to dismiss, he claims investigators withheld cell phone information that showed he was in a different area from the location of the murder. At the same time, a witness allegedly told police he saw Bay alive. Hayes admits to having sex with Rachel Bay that night, but claims he didn't kill her. Investigators disagree.
We have been able to take what we believe is a serial killer off the streets.
And Robert Hayes will be back in court in Palm Beach County later this month to argue his motion to dismiss. Prosecutors down in Volusia County, where the other murders happened, are seeking the death penalty. They say that he targeted prostitutes for many years.
Okay, Gigi, let's get right into it, because what is going on with this hearing that's going to happen, this Nelson hearing? It's not that he technically wants to represent himself, but right, he's upset with his lawyers, right? That's my understanding. He's upset with his lawyers who maybe don't believe in his innocence. Explain to us what he's asking for here.
Yeah, in a Nelson hearing, it's a hearing where the judge decides whether or not there was ineffective assistance of counsel. And you're right about it not necessarily being a hearing where he's asking to represent himself. Maybe the outcome is if the judge ends up finding ineffective assistance of counsel, which, by the way, is a very high standard to meet, and it's a very vague standard as well. If the judge ends up finding that he was granted ineffective assistance of counsel, then likely they would just appoint a new attorney for this case. And even then, the judge may choose to appoint a new attorney because this type of Nelson hearing, it comes from a lot of distrust between the client and the attorney. And if it gets to this point, it's because there's a difficult relationship between the two that would likely make it difficult for them to work together to achieve the goal of pursuing trial.
And sticking with this for a second, Gigi, because in December, Hayes files this handwritten motion to dismiss the charges. So in that way, it's almost like he's representing himself. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting about the cell tower evidence. Do they have that evidence with them, and are they withholding it from the defense? I don't know if an entire motion to dismiss will prevail based on that fact. I think the remedy would more likely be for the judge to order the state to hand over all of the evidence in the case that they have against Hayes. and the fact that he waived his right to speedy trial, which means that this case doesn't have to come within 175 days of the charges being filed, then the judges, they're going to be able to have time to be able to go through the discovery process and make sure that all of the evidence is handed over to him in this case.
You mentioned evidence. You know who I'm going to ask? I'm going to ask Joseph about it. So, Joseph, we look at the evidence against him with these 4 women. Walk us through what stands out to you. Walk us through what the case is against him. Where does it really tie in that he is the Daytona Beach serial killer?
Well, I have to tell you, Jesse, he better fight with his attorneys, because right now, this rape kit that they talk about, this is not some kind of imagined evidence that you can kind of pull from a peripheral area. This rape kit is applied internally. There's vaginal swabs, rectal swabs, oral swabs. This is coming from within the body. And so when you begin to look at this from a numeric standpoint, from a probability standpoint, that it could have been anyone else other than him, and then it's very convenient to say, oh, yeah, by the way, yeah, in fact, I did happen to have sexual intercourse with this woman on the same night that she was raped and strangled. So I think that is a huge mountain to overcome. I think that we're seeing this more and more, with DNA and the problems that these defense attorneys, the only thing that they can really do to kind of defend an individual is from a procedural standpoint, because you're grasping at straws. Other than that, numbers are really, really difficult to defeat in this particular case.
Joseph, sticking with you for a second, what is the MO here? I mean, you have women, several of the victims who were working girls, who were prostitutes, shot in the head. There seemed to be a pattern here. And what does that tell you?
Well, he deviated with the one lady in question here where she was choked out. The other ones were, in fact, shot. So that's kind of an evolution in his practice. However, I've been involved in the investigation of several series of serial killings. I don't recall a single one where it did not involve prostitutes, and that's because they are a forgotten population. They're generally somebody that is abused, that's out on the street, that not many people are going to miss because they're disconnected from family, from friends. Many of them have drug dependency issues, and they're willing to literally give their bodies over to total strangers. So when you have a predatory person that comes into the picture, it's fish in a barrel. It's so easy to pick these people off, and no one is going to know. The curious thing about when an individual is targeted in a fringe environment like this is there could be so many other bodies that are out there that no one is aware of because no one's ever reported on missing. And this is very standard right down the line. You see this kind of behavior more often than not.
Yeah, and the sex worker component is very interesting to this. Joseph, one more quick question, 30 seconds. There's another victim, Stacy Gage, who, apparently the body was decomposed. They don't have enough to tie Hayes to her death. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that, unfortunately, I think as an investigator, I'm not talking about from a prosecutor standpoint or whatnot, you wish that you had enough information so that the deceased and their families, particularly the memory of the deceased, the life they led, could be remembered in court. That you could speak to that, where there would be tiebacks. Unfortunately, if there is an effort to hide a body or sequester a body, sometimes that evidence just diminishes, Jesse, and there's no sinew to tie it back investigatively.
Maybe, I know they're still investigating that case, and maybe he'll eventually be tied, or maybe someone else will be tied, because it's, unexplained murders are just, it's horrible for the victims' family members. You really want to understand what's happening. We're going to switch gears and focus on a different story, a more lighter story, but a fascinating one. Jason Collier, a Texas police chief, has been arrested and charged with tampering with a government document with intent to defraud to defraud. Why? For allegedly sending a fake marriage annulment to a woman that he was seeing, because apparently Collier was living multiple lives. He had another girlfriend, he was married. It's kind of hard to think about how he was actually had time to do legitimate police work. Let me ask you this, Gigi. What a story about this. What do you think about this charge that this guy now faces?
I think it's great. I think that they should, if I was a defense attorney and this police chief was involved in any of my cases that I had ever had, I would be filing some motions. This guy's got serious moral turpitude. He forges legal documents for his benefit this time. And if he's able to do it to his girlfriend and his other girlfriend and to his wife, then what's stopping him from forging documents in other cases against people that he doesn't even know? I think that this guy's entire career is called into the question because he wanted to fool around with some other women on the side. I'm excited to see what he gets here, Jesse.
Yeah, and Gigi, I mean, he was arrested by the Texas Rangers. He's placed on administrative leave. I see these women now all teaming up against him to be crucial witnesses if this ultimately goes to trial. I mean, I could just imagine how that would look. What do you think about that?
I'm sure all these women are thinking to myself, oh, you want to throw some fake documents at me and try to trick me. All right, let me let you know something. And that's why they blew him up on social media. And that's why the Texas Rangers got involved, because these women got together and realized this person has some serious moral turpitude issues and that he is not fit to be an officer of the law. He's running around here with dating profiles while he's got a wife at home and a girlfriend over here and a girlfriend over there. This is not someone who's fit for law enforcement, not someone who's deserving of the trust of the people. And these women are going to see to it that he gets what he gets.
And real quick, Gigi, what could he get? What's the maximum here?
Yeah, this is a serious felony. He could face some prison time over this, depending on his criminal history, which I don't know if he has any, but this is a serious crime against someone who has a lot of trust with the public, and he violated that trust. So I imagine he's going to get the book thrown at him.
All right. Well, Joseph, I want to give you an opportunity to jump in on this story because you don't see this every day. What do you think of it?
It's heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking from the perspective that this guy is signing off on who's hired into that office, and whether or not these individuals that he hired are, say, high moral character. Everything that they do, and this kind of dovetails with what Gigi was saying, everything that they do, every case that they work, is going to be drawn into question now. So now the entire department, no matter how good a cop you are, you're always going to be seen through this cracked lens of who hired you, who administrated you, these sorts of things. And so that diminishes the trust for that little community, moving forward. Cops, good and bad, are held up to a different moral standard than the rest of us, as well as should be. And so you're expected to lead a life that's free of blame. And in this case right here, it's not just him, but it's the entire department that's going to have terrible damage done to.
Yeah, microscope is going to be put down and see what ultimately was uncovered there, because, man, this is not a good sign for anybody that had worked with him or for him. And obviously this guy created a very big stain. When we come back, though, I want to finish out our report on a really incredible story about a guy who was living in Chicago O'Hare Airport for months undetected. We'll be back. Well, this is a story that you probably have never heard before, because a man was caught living in the Chicago O'Hare Airport for 3 months because he was reportedly scared to go back home to California due to COVID-19 concerns. Now, we're going to show you a video of his arrest, and we're going to show it right now. There's no sound to the video. You could just kind of see the shock of these law enforcement members and also the personnel in the airport, because Aditya Singh had seemingly been able to remain on restricted premises by using a security badge that he allegedly stole from an airport official. Now, he was charged with theft and criminal trespass. He's currently in jail without bond. And now it becomes a question, what could happen to him and how was this able to happen? Gigi, I'd like to start with you. The charges that he faces, what could happen? How could this ultimately be resolved? Because this is a really interesting case.
Really interesting case. Yeah, I believe it's a third-degree felony he's facing, which carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison. And the judge found it was really concerning, and she made a fabulous point where these airports are supposed to be so secure, especially post 9/11. We have all sorts of regulations and restrictions in the airports. So it's really surprising to learn that somebody can just squat in an airport for 3 months. And we're lucky this person was just scared of COVID, which is its own interesting issue. But what if this person had nefarious intentions, or had some sort of malicious intent here? That could have been very, very dangerous. And that this was a risk to the community that someone was able to impersonate airport personnel for so long. This case is very interesting.
Not even surprising. It's terrifying. It's scary that he was able to live there. And so, Joseph, the question becomes, what did the airport do wrong? I mean, what do they have to look at the protocols? Because this has to be investigated. What needs to be put in place that maybe wasn't there in the first time? I mean, after 9/11, you almost thought the airport was the safest place, how much protocols they put in place and safety measures to make sure nothing like that would ever happen. And now, look what's going on. A guy lives in the airport? I don't understand what happened here.
Yeah, and you would think that security sweeps would provide that there would be like a protocol that would be set in place where they would walk through an area and that they could actually recognize people that are there for a protracted period of time. I think that's the scary element to it. Listen, Chicago here, for me personally, was one of the most intimidating airports as a young man I ever flew into, because it is so vast and it is just heavily populated. You kind of get swept up in the crowd in this place. And so I was intimidated within that environment. And it would seem that it would be very easy to kind of get lost in the shuffle, if you will, to kind of blend into the background. And particularly now, you can see what's really troubling about this is because the population is down for people traveling. How did they not recognize we've been in quarantine for how long now? A year or however long it is? How could they not recognize this guy's face popping up on a regular basis?
Well, Gigi, and I want you to listen to me on this and just stick with me because this might be a crazy concept, but you tell me if there's any water to this. The guy says, if you believe him, that he stayed there because he was scared of going back to California. California, a hot spot of COVID infections. Lives in the airport. Didn't hurt anybody. Yeah, stole the badge, allegedly. That's what's going on here. Didn't just stayed there, was scared. We're living in a crazy time. Is there any way that these charges could be dropped? Is there any way that someone might feel sympathy for him? Maybe if he even takes a plea deal in terms of sentencing, or even if it goes to trial and he decides, the sympathy factor here. What do you think about it?
I don't think that the state is going to be inclined to dismiss this case, only because they're going to want to send a message to the community that you can't just squat in an airport for 3 months and nothing happened to you. And I agree with you, Jesse. I think his fears are valid. He was going back home to LA, which we know is a COVID hotspot. It's overrun with COVID cases. I think his fear of going back to LA is justified. I don't think his 3 month squat is justified. But here we have, like you said, a nonviolent offender with no criminal history. I think he's got a good shot of getting some leniency if he decides to plead guilty and accept responsibility in this case. I don't know if he's going to get a lot of sympathy at trial, only because the jurors don't make decisions on emotions. They make decisions on fact and law. And the fact is, he was trespassing in the airport where he had no right to be.
Joseph, you raised up an interesting point as well, the idea of, how could this happen? And this investigation now, I imagine they're going to look at different security cam footage. They'll interview witnesses. Could someone else get in trouble here? Because I'm curious through this investigation, what ultimately happens.
Yeah, the director of security can get in trouble. All of these airports they're not only kind of bolstered by the local police department. You go to New York, and of course, you guys have Port Authority that handles transportation hubs and that sort of thing. But you have the local constabulary that's there, and then you have an indwelling security force that's in there who's sitting at the cameras watching this thing over and over. So I think that probably the director of security for for the airport itself, could be in some hot water here. He might want to, update his resume.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. I mean, there is going to be some explaining to do. That's the very least of what happens. Joseph, Gigi, thanks for taking the time and joining me to talk about all these interesting cases. Everyone out there, thank you for taking the time and spending us with here on Law&Crime Report. We'll be back tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern. Until then, be safe.